John, thank you very much for joining us today. I've already given you an introduction at the top of the presentation. Can you tell me a bit more about the FSB, the task force, and what they're trying to achieve?
Yeah, of course I can, Dan, and thanks very much for inviting me to come along.
It's a pleasure.
So the task force came out of some work that the FSB did and the Bank of England to see whether climate change was a sort of risk for financial stability, and they concluded it was. And therefore Mark set up the CART task force and wanted the private sector to lead it. The theory being that if companies that were exposed to climate change disclose those risks better, the providers of finance, the bankers, the investors, the insurers, could make better decisions and then manage that financial stability and disclose those risks on to the market and the regulators. So that's a sort of the construct. We had a real tension between having something that was deeply technical and complex and something that was very workable, but perhaps not quite as ambitious, and I think we hit that balance. There were 32 of us drawn from all across the G20, all sectors, so it was great balance. And we wanted it to be, a framework that would give consistent disclosures, comparable disclosures, cost-effective and decision useful. So we set the bar on ourselves quite high. A little bit about what is in the framework. So the report was released in December. We managed to position PwC to run the consultation, so we've got great insight on what companies are thinking about this report, and it goes to the G20 this Friday. There are really 4 areas of recommendation, and beautifully simple around governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. Under governance, what is the board's responsibility and oversight for climate change? What's the role of the audit committee, the risk committee, and what's the role of management to sort of execute a strategy around climate? Under strategy, which I think is a really big opportunity for us, work out where climate change is material. What will happen to your strategy, your business plan, your financial plan under different scenarios, so forward-looking. Under risk management, identify, manage, mitigate the risks, and integrate it into your overall enterprise risk management. Another great opportunity for us. And then under metrics and targets, build the targets and the KPIs around those other 3 areas and disclose them. And I think really important for us, disclose them as financial numbers in financial filings, and that's what really connects this back to the firm.
Understood. I have to say it's a massive compliment to the firm. It's a massive compliment to you that you're on this task force. It's phenomenal. I presume you talk to clients about this, but what do these disclosures mean for them, and how are they reacting to that?
Yeah. I think there's going to be a whole range of issues for clients. If you are, so firstly, what sectors? Let's start there. Carbon-intensive sectors: energy, utilities, mining, transportation, industrial products, real estate, food and agriculture, water. So a whole range of sectors where we've got clients, plus financial services, banks, insurers, asset managers, and I think importantly asset owners, because actually they're the people at the end of the investment chain that really need to know where these risks are. So that brings our pensions business in as well. From the consultation, we know that companies are going to find scenarios really difficult. They're just really like stress tests under different sort of climate change outcomes. We've got a great opportunity there. We've got the climate change models in actuarial services. We've got the ability to run stress tests, put them together, and we can really help our clients. And that's what we've been doing with Unilever, for example, with BP, helping them think about different scenarios. I think the other area will be around setting the right KPIs and targets. So that goes right to our sort of performance assurance and reporting business, and I think that'll be an area of difficulty, particularly having to work out how to get them into financial filings. So using our long heritage as auditors and financial reporters to get those right. And then finally, I think there are going to be some difficult issues around governance. How do I really integrate this into the way I think about risk? How do I integrate it back into my strategy? So some good opportunities there for our risk consulting people and for strategy end.
That's brilliant, actually. I mean, this really is involving the whole firm. Yeah. And clients reacting to this, so far?
Yeah, we've not really had any problems getting into clients. What I would say is that most of my contacts tend to sit broadly in the sustainability or risk area. And the people we really want to talk to are CFOs, CROs, and I would say audit committee chairs as well. So we've had some really good progress when we've worked with our financial services practice. Nigel and Kevin and team have really helped us get through the door of clients. We've worked with Steve Jennings in the utilities and power area. He's got us in to see the CFO of National Grid, of SSE. So actually, if we can get into the CFO, they absolutely get it. I mean, this is just the next generation of financial disclosure. What they don't get is, how can I do a scenario? How can I build the financial metrics, and how do I integrate it? And so I think, if we can really focus on those three areas and turn those conversations into, we can help you. And that's really what's happened at, for example, Credit Suisse, where we've been working for about a year. We've just presented this to the Chief Risk Officer, Joe Oshlin, in Zurich, and now follow-on meetings with their risk people to say, how do we really grab this and manage it properly?
You've done a great job in summarising this. This is superb. So in terms of LRP, and I think you've partially answered this actually, but in terms of, we've got the LRPs, on the webcast, what should they be doing in terms of conversations with clients, and who should they be talking with, and what can they be doing to help it?
Yeah. So I think what, sort of the ask, if I can sort of be that cheeky, is...
No, that's what we want.
What we really want is to work with the leaders of industry and the LRPs. So we can say, these are the priority industries where we want to focus, and we can also talk about which countries where we think implementation will happen more quickly, which is likely to be within Europe. China, for example, has also indicated it wants to move quickly. South Africa. I think the US, we're still waiting for a broader vision on climate change from the new president, beyond the sort of rhetoric of the campaign trail. So we want to work with the leaders of industry to say, how do we identify the clients that we think are most likely to want to do this? So we've set up contact points for each of those sectors, and just connecting them to the industry marketing drivers, for example, would be a huge benefit. We want to do the same with the LRPs and go and jointly meet the CFOs or the CROs of those clients with the LRPs. And to support that, we've produced both a sort of CEO summary. The report's 212 pages long. I think a CEO or CFO would probably prefer our 6-page summary.
I liked your summary.
Yeah. Good, thank you. But also, we've done one for each sector, because there are different implications. And so, let us talk to your drivers, get us into your clients, and we will help push us across the line.
I really did like the summary. You've put an enormous amount of effort into this. So it's going to the G20 Friday. Will there be quite a bit of, do you anticipate quite a bit of press coverage on this?
I think so, yes. I mean, the report went to the FSB when it met in November, and it was approved with 1 or 2 minor comments. And that was has now been out in consultation. Talking to the G20 Sherpas ahead of this process, we're not expecting any serious pushback. They'll have the benefit of the consultation results, which have been very supportive from the private sector. And really then, the question that will be asked of the finance ministers is, how are you going to implement it in your country? France already has legislation that will enable it to regulate. We don't expect countries in the short term to regulate, but Mark Carney's already indicated he will get as close as he can to that in the UK. I'd expect the same in Canada. Germany said it doesn't favour regulation in the short term, but it will review that position in 2 to 3 years. So, outside of regulation, there are 2 other really big drivers. The credit ratings agencies, Moody's and Standard & Poor's, are now looking at how to integrate this into credit and equity ratings. So that could have a major impact on our clients, particularly if they're kind of the triple B minus, hovering above sub-investment grade. The second area are the investors. And just yesterday, BlackRock announced that it was going to require its companies it invests in to make better disclosure on climate change. Aviva investors have gone one stage further and said, we're going to vote against the financial statements of any companies in carbon-intensive sectors that don't report. So you're beginning to see pressure from investors, from ratings agencies, and the sort of threat of regulation in the midterm.
The timing of this webcast is superb, isn't it? So we'll have, I think, as a result of the G20 meeting, we will have quite a bit of media focus on this. Our clients will want to know more. I mean, it's perfect just being able to take you and take the team in to have these conversations on a really timely basis. So I think my plea to the LRP community was to make sure they engage with you. And I know from our discussions, the efforts you're putting into this with your team, we can get out to clients really quickly on this. It's superb. Let me just see if there's any questions coming in. There are questions coming in. So thank you to those, and I must apologise, I didn't take the questions at the end of the cyber discussion. So the first question for you, John, that's coming in from the audience: what are the first steps clients should be taking?
Well, I think there's a sort of series of building blocks. Most companies, have not gathered the data on, what are the impacts of climate change, maybe on their supply chain, maybe on their operating assets, or if you're in the financial services industry, perhaps on a loan portfolio, portfolio of mortgages, for example, or an investment book or an underwritten book. And so, the first challenge is data. When we've worked with clients and we say, show us your data, frankly, it's woeful. And even if they've got it, they can't find it. So, a really big opportunity to work with our data and analytics people to help them get the data. The second building block is the scenarios. Not many companies do stress tests. The banks have done them, for the last 10, 15 years. They're quite well advanced. But many industrial sectors outside of, say, energy just don't think about what's the impact of climate change on my business. And so the second thing they should be doing is saying, well, how do I build those models? And again, great opportunity for us to work with them and support them. And then the third thing is to say, once I've built those models, what do I do with the outputs? How do I think about disclosing them? What's the right balance between the annual report and accounts and maybe other disclosure channels, because we don't want to add another 100 pages to a report and accounts. And what are the right financial metrics that are consistent with my peers? So an opportunity for us to work with groups of clients around sectors to say, well, let's design those KPIs so it's comparable. The very first thing, though, is get it discussed at the board table, because the board have got to oversee this. So if we can get our clients talking at the board on this and putting some weight behind it, I think those other three things will just fall out of it.
And boards are talking about this, but they do need support. So I don't think we'll be pushing a closed door here. I think we'll be pushing an opening door here.
I think we are. I mean, if you look at the sort of CEO surveys that we've run over the past 2 or 3 years, where we've asked a question about climate change, it always comes up very high, and there's always, a discussion on climate at least once or twice a year. All we're doing is moving it out of the sort of sustainability department into finance and risk, and that makes it a much more business-like discussion.
Yeah, beautifully said. Another question that's coming for you, John. When do clients need to be taking action? When will this really impact them?
Well, this is going to be one of the biggest challenges for clients, because we've got a timeline for the task force which says the report goes to the Heads of State Summit in July. Not many times PwC gets a report onto a Prime Minister's or a President's desk, so that's a great profile. What we don't know is what each country will do, and it's likely, therefore, that you will have a slight patchwork of approaches. The G20 will try and give some consistency. But I would say 2017 is a year to sort of, get ready, to say, do I have some data? Do I have the right governance? Could I run a scenario? I think for the financial year 2018, many investors will be saying, have you disclosed? And if you haven't, why not? So sort of a disclose or, explain approach. So to get ready for that, we should be talking to clients really now, and making sure that for 2018, they're able to disclose for the sort of reporting at the end of 2018 into 2019. And the other thing that PwC will be doing is supplying a sort of monitoring of that to the Financial Stability Board. So actually, we will also be looking to see where those disclosures are happening.
Oh, that's quite useful to be doing that. So you're right in the centre. But our clients, many of our clients will want to be ahead of the competition, not working at the same time as as their competition. So I think you're right, but I think some of them, knowing that, for example, investors are taking a keener eye on this, stakeholders are taking a keener eye here, I think they'll want to be doing it like now. So so I think the message, either you get ready now or you start doing it now. We should be talking to clients now.
No, absolutely. And I think, our leading clients have already been doing this to a greater or lesser extent, and are working with us, and I'm sure with others, to say, how do we keep ahead of the curve? I think the next rung down, the sort of the fast followers, is a really rich seam. I was talking to a client yesterday, and they said, we don't want to become second, third, or fourth in our industry. We want to be the leader.
Absolutely. Exactly. That's exactly the point. John, fantastic. I'm sorry we've run out of time. That was a brilliant summary. Congratulations to you personally on all the work you've been doing, and to your team. And I'm sure the LRPs will engage with you on this. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Dan.
It was a real pleasure.